Hello everyone and welcome to the Mind Games podcast, where at each episode we piece together the puzzle that is mental health with a bit of stuff in between. So this is real talk from two very real people. I am of course Thomas Welburn, chronic health warrior and multimedia extraordinaire. Joining me on this inner path of discovery is my co-presenter, the master of positivity, the liquid to my solid snake, Chris Allen, occupational health advisor, mental health first aid instructor and all-round great guy. How's it going, Chris?
I absolutely love it. That is the greatest. It's like the pinnacle of culture, especially game culture, but broadly culture in the modern world. Yes, Metal Gear Solid is the greatest thing that's ever been
incredible,
invented.
Isn't it? I could have said loads. I could have said Big Boss. I could have just gone. I could have gone even more meta, but I kept it.
Somehow, I think it fits. The liquid one.
Well, yeah,
brilliant. Brilliant.
There's a lot of lore. We're not even going to go into Metal Gear Solid lore because we'll be here for about 3 weeks.
I know. I tried once. I did try once. There was a YouTube video that was about 4 hours long, and I think I fell asleep.
Did you come back out of it the same person you went in?
Metal Gear Solid has changed my life. I would say, yeah, the original game on the PS2 back in whatever 1996, whenever it was, put me on a different course. Yeah, so what's going on in your world, man?
What's going on in my world? There's a lot going on in my world. Yeah, work's busy right now. In the realm of Thomas Welburn's world. Chronic health battles are going well though, because staying on the topic of that, things are still. I've got a desk made of wood, so I'll just knock on that. But things are still going well on that front. I have a checkup on the 22nd to see if it is Crohn's. Won't go into too much detail on that at the moment because until they tell me more, I'm just gonna keep that in the ether for now. But that's what's going on in my world. And what about yourself, Chris?
Busy, man. Busy. Like, business is good. Work is good. Life is good, man. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you.
That's great. So we're both in a very happy place right now, aren't we?
Yeah.
So yeah, on this episode of the Mind Games podcast, we've got a few things, a couple of things to talk about in the discussion. Obviously, there's a big thing coming up on the calendar. No spoilers. But if you're in on this stuff, you'll know what it is. Got an interesting question and a good little bit on the in-clinic, which I think ties in with something that the UK government, at least, are about to jump on, which is the back to work, which I think it's from the 1st of October. So that's going to be a good little piece on just recommendations for what we think or what Chris thinks is good for employers now that we're all going to be slowly getting pushed back into the office. I would just start this before we go into the discussion because I think it's pretty breaking news. It's only in the last couple of days. Did you see anything about Naomi Osaka?
A little bit.
How she's dropped out again. It looks like she's walked away from tennis for a while because of her US Open performance. We're not going to go into this in the discussion. I just wanted to mention it at the start because I just thought it was interesting. It goes back to what we said and what I was saying in that, I don't know, she's walked away. Is tennis, is being in the public sphere, the celebrity dome, a good thing for her given what her personality is? I'm starting to think that maybe it's not. Maybe it's good that she's walked away.
Maybe the answer to the question is not right now. For the time being. Yeah.
And I think, she's taken some time to herself, which definitely not a bad thing given everything that's going on. So we're not going to go into too much on that, but I just thought it was worth a mention because it ties in with what we've already talked about. But on that note, let's go into the discussion and get on to our main 2 topics for this episode.
Discussion.
So we're back with the discussion part, and I think we will lead this with an article that was in The Guardian. It was about burnout. kind of culture at workplaces. This has obviously become more prevalent during the pandemic, especially. And their employers are starting to come up with kind of interesting ways to, I guess, mitigate that, make it less apparent. Well, just less of a problem, I guess. I think Chris will go over it a little bit more, but I have some things to say on it and the ways it should be implemented from my personal perspective. So do you want to go into a bit more detail on it, Chris?
Yeah, sure. Well, the headline news was that, I believe it was Nike, wasn't it, are offering or giving staff a week of paid leave to kind of combat burnout. It's a burnout break to help people recover from the marathon or the sprint that turned into the marathon that has been the pandemic and the lockdown and the remote working and all of this sort of stuff. It's not the first place that I'm aware of that's done this. For example, I know of a place where I work that did it last year for 1 day, an extra annual leave day for everybody to disconnect and unwind. But this is the first time that I've seen the approach be implemented this way by a multinational. So one of the places that I do business with is Mental Health First Aid. I'm an accredited trainer, so Mental Health First Aid England. They shut down for a whole week every August, and that's been happening for years. It's Wellbeing Week for all the staff. They just shut down, and they let all of us instructors know, you got to get your orders in for your manuals and, everything that you possibly think that you might need in August. Do it in June and July, and they give us plenty of notice, and it pretty much works. I have not yet needed emergency support as an instructor from MHFA as long as I've gotten all that notice. So as far as I'm concerned, it works for them. But this is the big global Nike brand, the multinational global conglomerate, and they're giving everybody a week off, and I think that's pretty good. I think they're setting exactly when it is going to be. So there's no negotiation. There's no like, I'll use that, at a later date or I'll bank that holiday. It's happening. Do it. And the news came from the head of marketing or something like this as well. So you've got to recognize that there's perhaps another ulterior motive associated with it as well, like broadcasting, we're a great company to work for and we take care of our staff, which you should do when you do the good stuff, I think. I don't say that in a particularly cynical way, but I do think when you do good stuff out there, set the agenda, tell everyone that you're doing it. And that's how I feel about that. But burnout is becoming a bigger problem. I'm seeing people with burnout more regularly. It's often getting labeled with different things like anxiety, depression, fatigue. And of course, a lot of these things require some sort of clinical diagnosis in order to be diagnosed. But burnout as a problem seems to be needs to be on the agenda for the longest time now, really. I'm talking to people in my professional and personal life who are experiencing the classic signs of burnout. Now, what are those? What are the classic signs of burnout? Fatigue, stress.
Probably depression.
Yeah, persistent low moods probably would be in there. And I mean, this article touched on how some research, the workplace wellbeing side of the Mind charity, we talk about how big of a problem it is. 40,000 staff members were surveyed, and just under 50% of those employees said that their well-being had gotten worse due to the pandemic. That's a lot.
That is.
Now, when you tie this into what we'll be talking about in a bit in relation to returning to the office, it begins to kind of paint a bit of a picture, doesn't it? Since people have been working from home, they're reporting burnout. What I don't have to hand is what people were reporting with regard to burnout before the pandemic. But I talk to people on a regular basis, pretty much daily, who want to get back in, cannot wait to get back in, versus don't want to go back in, rather like work a hybrid model, however you want to look at it. So I think what we need to focus on here is the thing that maybe Nike haven't got great, perhaps, is the consultation thing. What do you guys need in order to battle burnout? What is it that you want? And maybe they did, I don't know. I don't think they did. I think they just said, here's a week off, do it. And of course, if your workplace said that to you, you'd love it, wouldn't you? Oh my God, Oh, week off. That's
Yeah.
going to be amazing.
Well,
that's going to be amazing.
I think that's where I've got to step in and say my bit, because
Go on.
it's okay giving people a week off as long as it's done the right way, because it's very easy. And this is the thing that I would worry about if my employer turned around and they were like, okay, we're going to give you all a week off to stop you from suffering burnout. Well, if I come back after my holiday and I have like a week's worth of work that's piled up and put me behind, and now I'm even more stressed because of the backlog of stuff that I now have to catch up with, then that's a problem. It needs to be managed properly.
Yeah. So what we have with us right here is a number of different companies who've done it different ways. Okay. So LinkedIn did this back in April. They gave everybody a week off. Bumble, the dating app.
Yeah,
what's it called?
Bumble. Yeah.
They did it too. They did it in June, I believe. Citigroup set down another thing, Zoom-free Fridays, which I like a lot. I like the idea of Zoom-free Fridays, but then people would just migrate over to email or phone calls, surely. I've seen a range of different ways that this sort of thing is implemented, either no email Fridays where you're supposed to go and talk to the person, or pick up the phone and talk to the person wherever possible. If you're in the same building, you've got to walk over to where their cubicle is or their office is and talk to them there. These sort of approaches are supposed to foster a different sort of arrangement with a different sort of level of connection within the company or the organization. And then something that one of my colleagues told me about recently was stand-up meetings where they're less than 15 minutes and you're supposed to be standing. But that means I've got to move the camera and probably hold the laptop up at eye level, which is a bit of a pain, and it means I won't make any notes. But the places that said that they would do it the way that the workers directed, if you like, was PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte. They said that we appreciate your point of view and we want you to direct us in exactly what it is that you need. So that kind of ties in with what you're saying there, isn't it, Tom?
But it sounds like some of them have put things in place, like the stuff that you mentioned they were doing on a Friday. Or was it no emails? Was it?
Zoom-free Fridays.
Zoom-free Fridays. I mean, I suppose again, those initiatives, that they sound great on paper, but I'm trying to think about how to phrase this properly. The initiative is great. The idea is great. It's a step in the right direction, but then it's down to individual managers within the organization to take this and use it properly, and not put burden on their staff for having this initiative in the first place. If they're using it for how it's intended, which is to give people a break, and they're not going to subject them to extra work afterwards, or, force them to make up for the lost time, then it's great. But that's what I worry about, especially in a massive multinational. It's very hard to keep track of each individual manager within the organization and how they're controlling their little team. And I'm sure there'll be some that are very reciprocal to this and understand what it's for, like we do, and they're all for it, and they know the benefits. And there's probably others that are a bit more militant in their managerial style and are just going to throw all of the work back at you when you come back. That's what worries me, because that could make people feel even worse than before they went on the break.
Yeah, and this is one of the challenges that people can bring to me when they're talking about taking some time off sick for their mental health. To loop it back to what I do on a regular basis, I'm having these conversations with people, and those that look at me in the face and say, I can't take time off. It's impossible. It's impossible. Go, okay, we'll try it your way. And inevitably that doesn't work out well. And they go off sick. They eventually go off sick, and they got to the break point a little later than when they first met me. But yeah, those people that cannot fathom taking time out because they've just got too much to do, generally, they burn out as well. And that's the issue that they're always worried about too. Can't take time off because not only have I got too much on, I will have even more on when I come back. And again, you make a fantastic point, Tom, about making sure that managers manage the workload as well as the people. But some encouraging news is coming from Scotland, of all places, is the trial in a 4-day week. And
yes, I did see that. Yes.
I love that.
Yeah, no, I think it's great if again, if it's used properly, and organizations are not just gonna try and pile extra stuff on you, but a 4-day week, I'm all for working less. Especially, I mean, I think a lot of people can work 4-day weeks, really, because I think in organizations there's a lot of wasted time, and I think you'll admit that.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of productivity that can be sort of fine-tuned if people are given the agency, the motivation to get their work done and manage their own workloads rather than be tied to a 9 to 5 schedule. Because someone who's up in the hierarchy likes to see people being busy. Now, what I will say about that as well comes a little from, he's a bit of a rock star, really, in the well-being working space. He runs the Chartered Institute of Professional, he's the president, of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. That's Kerry Cooper. And he's talking from the slant of millennials. I've seen him on the news and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, that's Kerry. But he's a bit of a rock star. He's got a great way about him. And I think that means that his methods are conducive to being communicated in an effective way. That's the only reason I say he's a bit of a rock star. But he's out there and he's making moves with regard to workplace well-being, which is great with his company. But every company now needs to and wants to retain millennials. And within that, seems to be infused the concept of flexibility and having good work-life balance. And if you want to come in late because you stay up late and that's just your lifestyle, then be accommodating for that sort of thing. It's these sort of approaches which are beginning, and these sort of advisors or whatever, if you like, and the new population that are coming into the working sphere with different values and different demands that are changing the workplace and changing what the workplace looks and feels like.
I'm absolutely one of those people. I'll just put that out there. I don't think 9 to 5 in this day and age, it's old fashioned. There are some jobs that need structure like that. For example, teaching, something like that. You probably do need structure. But I think in jobs like, let's say, I don't know. Would you say that yours needs structure, Chris? You probably do. I would for yours, yeah. But I think for ones like mine, that management of your own workload and your own work schedule, I think, is part and parcel of the job. And I think it's a good thing, and it should be encouraged, because I'm way more productive and on the ball with what I do if I am left to my own devices in terms of with my own deadlines and my own workload and what I need to do. If I haven't got someone clock watching me or telling me that I have to work these hours every single day, then I will get more done and I will be more productive.
What does the opposite do to you?
What, being in a rigid structure?
Yeah. Offering inflexible working, saying you must be there 9 to 5 and you get your lunch break and but you cannot walk out the door before 5 o'clock and you must be through the door at 9. Otherwise, I'm going to have a problem. What does that do for you? I
mean, when we're scheduling shoots for filming or recording people, they can be at any time of the day. So if I'm stuck to a rigid structure, it's going to mess up my organization for the day anyway, just completely. Sure. So there's that. And the way these types of jobs work, especially creative ones, and this is me being honest, I'm not coming across as work shy or anything like that, or someone who doesn't do anything, but sometimes you'll have days where you're not genuinely doing much. And then other weeks, you'll have a packed calendar where maybe you're working until 8 and 9 o'clock at night. And that's the nature of the job. So that's why there needs to be flexibility, because it depends on the work that you're getting as to how busy you are and, when it needs to be filmed, when the deadlines are. It's not just the continuous work stream. Sometimes you'll have quiet periods, and other times you'll be back to back until really late, which is what it's like for me at this moment. And I'm fine with that, because that's the nature of the job. If it was a 9 to 5, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah, understood. So what I'm gathering from you then is that having some control over the schedule and having the capacity to be flexible most definitely improves your well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, yeah. I don't even think there's any debate on that.
Which segues nicely, doesn't it, into the whole return to work argument.
Which I think the in-clinic is going to be an interesting one. That's why I wanted to throw that in, because I've got a lot to say, and I'm sure you do, Chris.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, have you got anything more to say on burnout? I think that's my closing statement. Is it's a great initiative, but please, if we're going to do it, please implement it properly, and please, managers, use it properly to help your staff. Don't just use it as, a stopgap where afterwards you're going to give them all the work that they didn't do in that time period. Because I've been burned by too many bad managers in the past, and I'm not a pessimist when it comes to this sort of stuff, but I always err on the side of caution, because I just know there's a lot of people with bad bosses who are going to not see it the same as me and you, Chris, and it could not be a benefit. And that worries me.
Well, here's a way to look at it. If you're working in a factory with machinery, is it better to have well-maintained machinery, or to have that machinery not well-maintained and to run out of juice and break down and crumble? It's so much better. Mm-hmm. Is it not? Mm-hmm. And if we use the same principle for anyone who's not minded the same way we are, is it better to operate a business with people that are well looked after, feel invested in the performance of the company or the endeavor that you're heading towards, not completely burnt out and unproductive? Personally, I would always go for a well-maintained machine over the run-ragged machine that never gets maintained, never gets looked after. There's a reason why your cars need an MOT every year, to make sure that it's not going to, completely go kaput in the middle of a motorway or something like this. There's a reason why maintenance is important for machinery. It's and I think the principle remains the same if we want to look at it from that way. If we're not accepting the moral argument, if we're not accepting the legal one either, which exists, but I won't bore you with the details. Let's accept the financial benefit of having good workers doing good work, who are well looked after, and can be creative, can be effective, and can be productive.
I will. Before we just move on to the Suicide Prevention Day as well, just quickly, one thing, and that kind of made me think of something. If this is implemented right, so if it's an organization, if it's an organizational wide stop for an entire week, so the whole organization just ceases operations for a week, then I could see how you can't really get a boss or a bad manager who's going to put extra work on you if it's a complete organizational wide shutdown for a week, because there's not going to be extra work generated during that week to put on you. So I suppose if it is implemented right, even the bad managers are not going to be able to use it as a way to give you more to do, because there won't be any work generated during that period. Is it an organizational wide shutdown that they were doing?
At Nike, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. So on that one, I think there probably isn't any room for exploitation, and it should give everyone a break, I think. So that's good.
Good.
So we'll move to the second topic now, which is, as I said, Suicide Prevention Day, or is it Suicide Prevention Week, Chris?
It's Suicide Prevention Day.
Suicide Prevention Day. And this is on the 10th of September. So
correct.
I think it will be after we've released this. Yes, it will. So, Chris, do you want to lead us in?
Yeah, sure. So Suicide Prevention Day, September the 10th, really, really important day of the calendar. Why is it so important? Well, the last statistics that were released, I believe, were for 2019, and it showed that just under 7,000 people in the UK died by suicide. And that is a major cause of preventable disease. Whether you like it or not, suicide is not inevitable. It's a tragedy. And it is a preventable cause of death. And that's a lot of people. I think the correct number is about 6,800 and something. But each one of those people, each one of those individual suicides has a ripple effect that reaches out and beyond and starkly affects people's lives. So not being well with regard to your mental health is still stigmatized, whether we like it or not. And talking about and around suicide is still stigmatized and it's difficult for people. I am training mental health first aid on a regular basis. It's not a suicide prevention course, but part of that is evaluating the risk of suicide in order for us to respond in an effective way. If anyone wants to know more, reach out to the email and ask me questions. But it's not a suicide prevention course. There are elements of suicide prevention in it. And I am still having regular conversations with people where they tell me, if you ask about suicide, don't you implant the idea in their head? And that is a pervasive myth about suicide. You do not implant. It's not inception. You don't implant the idea in someone's head. But it's a common question,
I was just about to say that. I've been asked that myself by people, so...
Yeah. So you're not going to implant the idea in someone's head just by asking, I promise you. It might be a bit awkward, but is it not better to feel a little bit awkward for 10, 15 minutes in a supportive conversation than it is to not have asked and then regret it for the rest of your life because the person took some action that cannot be undone? Now, the good news is that thoughts of suicide are very common, much more common than we tend to believe, that we tend to accept. And of course, we cannot really quantify how many thoughts of suicide happen. It takes people saying, yes, I had thoughts of suicide on some questionnaire somewhere in order to quantify that information. It's not something that people generally discuss because of the taboo. Actions are much rarer. So people who try and complete suicide, people who try and take their own life, much rarer than thoughts. Okay? And then however we want to term it, people who complete suicide, people who actually complete the act, kill themselves, that's much rarer than that as well. So it is a big public health issue, and it's a source of preventable disease, preventable death in the UK, globally. And bringing an awareness day into the equation means that we have conversations like this, Tom.
So, I mean, your takeaway message for this then? My
takeaway message is take notice of Suicide Prevention Day. Look on the internet to see what's happening. Look for resources that might help you to have those difficult questions, have those difficult conversations, because they can be difficult. I talk about it all the time. You've had the question asked of you. We can go into how you felt when someone asked that if you want, because I'm sure there's lots of people out there who've thought about it, may have even planned it, and no one has ever asked them because they never tried to complete or follow through, or they never acted on their plan. There is things that we can do as a society, as individual people, as groups of people, as friends, as family members, in order to stop this majorly preventable method of dying and method of mental ill health and death. It needs action. And so ask, talk, look for the resources, take notice of the fact, share some stuff on social media to raise the profile. We will be.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of how to respond to that. But when you say, obviously you're not putting ideas in their head when you ask them, because the idea is probably already there. Which is why you're asking them. If you're
or not,
yeah. But I guess typically, if you're asking someone about suicide, it would be because you have an inclination that they're considering it, right?
Yeah. Follow your gut.
Yeah.
There's ways that you can ask. We go into this in a lot more detail on the MHFA course. And if there's anyone who's been on one of my MHFA courses or any other MHFA course in the UK who has got a question with regard to this matter, email in. Message us on social media, send a carrier pigeon, ask around and about it. Very, very happy to discuss these sort of things.
Send a drone.
Send a drone. Yeah. with a message attached to it. That'd be cool. And film it while you're doing it, because people like that stuff, don't they, on social media?
They do.
Like those videos on YouTube and that. But yeah, there's ways of exploring these sort of thoughts and feelings with people that are not like so direct as like full on eye contact. Are you suicidal? There's other ways of exploring this.
So if you talk to someone about suicide who maybe it turns out that they weren't considering it, that people are talking about putting an idea in their head, which is obviously probably not true. I imagine, and I have to ask this just because out of curiosity, I imagine there is a small risk, probably much smaller than not saying anything to them at all, because I imagine that's far worse, because if you've got no one to talk to and no one to open up to, you're much more likely to act. I'm sure that's way more likely, but there must be a small risk if you talk to someone about it that they may also act as well as a result of that conversation. I imagine it's probably very small.
Yeah, people are going to do what they're going to do regardless, but at least if they open up about it, there is hope. There is a doorway in which you can walk through. If someone is talking to you about suicide, it means there is hope for their life and for their future, in which case we can begin to explore the opportunities for support that do exist.
Yeah. Have we got anything more to talk about for Suicide Prevention Day? Because I think you summed it up very well.
Thank you.
So are you happy, Chris, with that?
I'm happy with that bit, yeah.
All right then. Well, that's great stuff. We're now going to jump into the Q&A part, and Chris has got a question, very interesting question. We do get a lot of interesting questions, actually, these days.
Yeah, I'm asking a lot more regularly. We're not getting them too much from socials, but I'm asking people when I see them out and about. So any listeners who are out there, anyone who has got a burning question, just drop us a line. However, like it could be by drone, that's fine. But also you could just send me a message on Instagram.
It's probably easier.
Yeah. Drones are expensive, aren't they?
Yeah, and you have to get approval from the Civil Aviation Authority sometimes. But that's a conversation for another day.
Q&A.
So welcome back, everyone. We're back at the Q&A section, and I am going to immediately hand over to Chris to basically ask the question.
Sure, thank you. So this question comes from AG. So thank you very much, AG. How do you stop overthinking and negative thoughts? How do you stop overthinking and negative thoughts? Now, I know this person, they're in my life, and I would say that this question is partly motivated from a need or a want to be able to fall asleep more effectively at nighttime, but not just that. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And we do have someone on the long list of guests that we're going to be getting in to discuss insomnia particularly, but I don't think this is that, because that's pretty clear to me. So how do you stop negative thoughts? Well, I think it comes down to mental discipline, and that might sound pretty blunt, but what I'm going to talk about is how you cultivate that. All right. So we eat healthy food in order to discipline our body. We exercise regularly in order to discipline our cardiovascular system. We know about all of these things, but when was the last time anyone ever introduced the idea of mental exercises in order to discipline your emotional health and well-being? Other than me, has anyone ever spoken to you about this, Tom? Does this come up?
I assume you're talking about mindfulness here, aren't you, Chris?
Well, I kind of am, but what I'm also talking about is something that's been born really out of at least 15 years of practice myself of meditation. And as a clinician, medical evidence that's been out there by a man called Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's the godfather of modern mindfulness, really. But he's been teaching medical students since the 80s and 90s how to meditate, which has, caused a concurrent ripple effect on them, their careers, and their patients that they treat as well. Because he had a vision, a big vision. He could foresee that if the physician is well looked after and their well-being is at a maximal level, then their patients are going to get the best possible medicine Yeah, the practice of the act of care and medicine, treatment, if you like, from that individual. So these ripple effects have gone out from there. Essentially, it's meditation distilled, all right, mindfulness distilled, and it requires the individual to cultivate this emotional discipline, this mental discipline themselves. I'm not going to tell you to go get an app. I'm sorry, but that's just not happening today. I'm not going to tell you to go get a book. No, there's no books. This all comes from here.
The heart and the brain.
Possibly here as well.
Yeah.
That's up for debate. But if you lose your phone, lose that app goes premium and you got to pay for it, or the book goes out of print, whatever. This is how you cultivate mental discipline without any technology, without nothing else other than just yourself and your mind, and Tom says, and your heart. Go.
I just want to dive in there and say, you're talking about dependency, right? Aren't you?
Well, I'm talking about the fact that in the world today, there is something for everything. So, if you want to learn, do you know what? There's an app to form habits. You can get an app to form and sustain habits. There's a habit tracking app. Yeah. Mm. If you want to make more healthy life choices in general via habitualize it, then there's apps for that. There's books for that. But what I'm trying to cultivate here is an immovable internal sense of the importance of what we're about to talk about, of looking after your own well-being, of having control over your own thoughts and not handing that over to a fallible system that's outside of oneself.
Yeah. And when the whole system is about yourself as an individual, then it's probably better that you rely on yourself for that system rather than an outside influence or an app or a book, right?
Yeah. I mean, so this is kind of, like I said, this is born out of many, many years of practice, but a really, really good example of how and when it can be used is I went to visit my friend just the other week to help celebrate his 40th birthday. It was a surprise, and he was on holiday with his family, and he was very remote. Shout out to Camille and Yishan if you're listening. They were very remote, and they were in a safari tent, and we as a family have ended up booking that same place for next year, and we're all going to be together in different safari tents this time next year. But one of the things that one of the people in the party turned to me and said was, "There's no Wi-Fi here," and so that got me thinking, how is so and so going to do their shopping? How is someone else going to do the X, Y, and Z? And we just don't need to rely for this element of our well-being and our mindfulness and our capacity to get things done. We don't need to rely on external things. We can do it with or without Wi-Fi. It's better done without Wi-Fi, in fact, and I think you develop your own path, as I have. And that's a story for another day because it's a long one, how I came to this. But you don't really need anything else other than just the memory of this instructional right now, and just practice this. And it's not one of those things where I can tell you a principle and it changes your point of view. You have to do it. Like the great Yoda said, there is no try, there is only do. All right. So if in the process of conducting this, of doing this practice that I'm setting down now, which I call situational attention training, if in the practice of this that you're deviated, you go off, that's the point. It doesn't mean that you tried to do situational attention training. It doesn't mean you tried. It means you're doing, all right? So let's talk about it. Let's break it down. So in order to cultivate mental discipline, in order to regain control over your thoughts and feelings, what you're going to do is practice situational attention training, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night. And this is all you need to do. That's 20 minutes. If you haven't got 20 minutes out of your day, then just don't watch one of those Netflix episodes. Just skip it. Congratulations, you saved an hour out of your life by doing that, all right?
Yeah.
So when you first wake up, 10 minutes, and before you go to bed, 10 minutes. Sometime throughout your day, in the first half of your day, 10 minutes, second half of your day, 10 minutes. Best done on first waking and just before sleeping. And all you do, literally, this is as easy and as hard as it gets, is you count your breaths. In 1, out 2, in 3, out 4. All the way up to 10, and you go back to 1. You don't go past 10. If you do, it's an accident and you go back to 1 again. That's it. That is it. And now through years of telling people how to do this, they come back to me and go, I keep thinking about my to-do list. And I'm like, great. Because every time you deviate from the counting of the breath, you get the opportunity to catch your attention and bring it back to one. And every time you do that, you're regaining a sense of control over the matter. All right. So in 1, out 2, all the way up to 10. All right. So in 8, out 9, in 10. I got it wrong in the sequence there, but in 1, out 2. Cycles of 10 for 10 minutes. That's all you have to do. You don't go past 10. If you do, 21, 22. Oh, wait, I was supposed to stop at 10. Back to 1. Always back to 1.
I'd like to advocate for this because Chris taught me this and I still use it.
In 6, out 7. What am I going to have for dinner today? Oh, I need to work out. I need to message my gym buddy. I need to reply to that email as well. Stop. In 1, out 2. In 3, out 4. Always bringing it back, bringing that thread of concentration, whatever we call it, that thread of the self, that mind bit that's wandered off, you bring it back. And what you will begin to find over time is you get up to 10 and back to 1 more and more often. And then you'll recognize it. And you go, oh, I've done 3 cycles. And no, stop, back to 1. And that's the point. 10 minutes is all it takes. If anyone out there does this, feels any sort of benefit of it, let me know. If anyone out there has any questions with regard to this, and Tom, I'll give you the floor in just a few moments in order to ask any follow-up questions that you might have or anything that's unclear. But if anyone out there does this and wants to know what the next step is after that, let us know.
Wow. Masterclass. I don't really know what else to say other than I use it myself. I still do to this day. It was one of the things Chris taught me at our occupational health appointment. I guess the only thing that I would add to that is that it's individual to you, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. So I guess the way that I practiced it was because, as Chris said, you think about a lot of stuff while you're doing it to start with. And even after you've done it for a while, you still do. If there's a very prominent thought that's been going through your mind all week, it's still going to pop up because it's just one of the, it's a subconscious thing that's kind of hard to train yourself out of. But I always used to force myself to start from the beginning. If a thought came into my head during the process that was interrupting it, I would start from the beginning and I would discipline myself to go up and down without thinking. And sometimes it would take a while because it would keep popping into my head, but I would just be like, right, I'm going to start from the beginning, and then I'd do it again and again and again. So I think that's my personalized approach to it because I wanted to be more disciplined. But I think it's personal to you. It's individual to you. Take what Chris said as not as this is set in stone. What Chris is giving you is advice. He's giving you tips on how to improve your well-being and your, what's going on up there. So take that and make it your own is what I would say. Individualized approach. Am I right, Chris?
100%. And I thought when people do come back to me with those questions after they've been doing it for a month or 3 months or however long it is since I last saw them, when they're out there and they're doing this practice and they come back and they say, what's next? It's always a great exploration with the individual to find what the next step is. I've got a few ideas, but I won't put them out there just yet. I've got a few steps in a pathway, but ultimately the journey is your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why, he's not trying to, I think I always feel like I have to say this sometimes, but he's not trying to sell you a product. He's trying to give you something, a piece of advice that you can take and you can own and you can shape yourself. It's a skill, really. And it's beneficial and it's not a product. It's just a piece of advice that you can take, you can sculpt and you can make it your own. And I think that's what makes it so important and good. Like it's a beneficial thing because it's not a salesperson tactic, and I think it's important to put it out there.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, so I think that about sums up the Q&A, doesn't it? I think we've answered that pretty well, and now it's time to go over to the final section for today, which is the in clinic, and we're going to tackle what I think, and I'm sure Chris agrees, is going to be a very popular topic over the next couple of months. So let's go over there right now.
In clinic.
Okay, we're back for the in clinic section. And yes, we are going to answer the popular topic, which everyone is probably thinking about or is going to be thinking about very soon, because I think it's the 1st of October officially, although I might be a couple of days out either way, but that is when the government, at least in the UK, is deciding that people should start making their way back to the office. And I think at the moment, the current guidance is still to work from home or have some sort of hybrid work pattern. But I think from October, that kind of changes, and the government are kind of allowing organizations to go more back to normal if they want. And I suppose when we say back to normal, we're talking pre-pandemic. But I guess the question to Chris would be, are we ever going to go back to what it was like pre-pandemic? And should we?
Great question. And so what I think I would say in relation to that is that I know people in business and I know people in jobs who had to be going into work on a regular basis anyway, despite lockdown and things like this. So what I think we're talking about is those people, that army, that, large proportion, the working population that were told in March last year that they've got to work from home for the foreseeable. Just a few weeks to flatten the curve, etc., extended out until we find ourselves where we are now. And so when we're thinking about these sort of things, we've got to give over recognition to the fact that people have been in a completely different environment, working in a completely different way, and being mandated or told or expected to just resume life, working life anyway, pick it up the way it was on the other side of this, exactly the way it was before, is not really going to work for the majority of people. Now, don't get me wrong, because I speak to clients on a regular basis who are telling me that they cannot wait for normality to resume for whatever reason. I need to get back in. I need to be on the regular in the office. However, the majority of people are saying, don't want to. I didn't like the 9 to 5, the Monday to Friday. Never liked that. That was the least bit I liked. Maybe the least bit they liked was the commute. But I think what we need to do is be as consultative as possible. And I say this not being, an owner of a big organization who, has got overheads. So you've got the look at it from a point of view of a few different angles. So there's the individual people who've been told to work from home. They've been sent chairs, they've been sent laptops, they're all ready to go. However, on the other side, I think we've got another level of complexity where organizations have got office buildings and they use those office buildings for however many years on full occupancy. And now if you take a walk around those places, they're like deserted ghost towns. Maybe you might see one person on the floor, maybe two. Now, I work in a clinical speciality where, I'm required on site. Sometimes, a lot of the time, I can do it on the video call here. But also, I'm going in on a bit more of a regular basis than I have been. And, I'm seeing that the buildings are empty. So what are they expected to do with these empty buildings?
Yeah.
I really don't know.
I'm seeing that myself, Chris. I'm seeing that myself.
There you go. So what do? Do they shrink down? Do they make the occupiable space smaller? Do they find different premises to make it smaller? That is a genie that can't be put back in the bottle. However, on the other side, we have to entertain the other side once again. Now, working from home genie is a genie that can't necessarily be put back in a bottle. So my answer to the question is, I do not envy anyone who's got to deal with this problem. But what I think the answer is consultation. Because if you start imposing things on people who like some of the changes that have been made over the past year and a bit, and then strictly told it's got to be, back to, again, Monday 9 to 5, all the way through to Friday 9 to 5, you're going to have a fair few people that are a bit disgruntled and they're going to leave. And that has been coined the term as the Great Exodus. And I think we've explored this previously, but I think you will find the workforce gravitating towards a more flexible approach, whether organizations like it or not. They're going to demand it and they will gravitate towards those organizations to provide that or are more embracing of that.
So obviously in clinic's your bit, Chris, and I'll get on to what I want to say in a second. But one thing I want to quickly ask you is about, because obviously we're talking about this from the perspective of what advice should we be giving what advice would you or us give to businesses on people going back? So your main bit of advice, the one bit that you're kind of pushing out there is consultation. Are we talking about individual staff consultations here? It needs to be very granular. Is that what you're saying?
I'm also saying it needs to be quite broad. So
Okay.
I am aware of one organization in particular that has done like a questionnaire, like a little click on the screen questionnaire type thing for their staff, asking, how many days a week do you want to come back? And not with no identification. Like the organization wanted them back 3 days, but overwhelmingly what came back from the people was that they only wanted to do 2 days in the office per week. And I think that sort of that sort of approach of actually asking people what they want to do can be at a number of different levels. And then of course you've got the individual level as well, where it's like, the world has changed for you. What do you need in order to, have some semblance of returning to the office again? Because we think working in the office is far superior than working from home. What do you think? And so my advice on top of that would be to trial, build on what we have, because this genie's not going to get put back in the bottle easily, and you're not going to be able to keep everybody happy. But what you might be able to do is find a compromise, a middle ground, whereas if, this department director wants everybody in 4 days a week, but everybody overwhelmingly wants to be in 3 days a week or 2 days a week, trial it and see, prove somebody to be right or wrong, and see where the chips can fall in the middle ground, I think, is what I would say. Because what's the other option?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
The Exodus.
I think that's fair.
Right?
I mean, you do have to look at it from both sides, because I'm an advocate of hybrid working. I think works for me. So I like having a couple of days in, and then I like doing my bits at home when I just need to, just have that tunnel vision focus, just get stuff done. But there has been talk, and I've seen it in the media, about especially younger people just starting out their career, just for first job, or, they're trying to climb the ladder. If we continue with a kind of home working first policy where the majority of people do spend most of their time at home, they're saying that it might make it difficult for younger people to progress in their careers, because they might not get noticed, because it's harder to get noticed when you're working from home versus an office environment. So there is all of that side. I think that's why a hybrid approach for me is the best balance, because you're serving both sides. And I can't see how going back to 5 days a week in the office is a good idea either, because we've kind of proven during this that home working actually does work. So that the argument for, well, we need to go back 5 days a week, I don't think is necessarily there either, because, things have functioned fine with most of us working from home. But I mean, I guess from that other side of the argument of, you've got quite a lot of younger people starting their careers saying, well, what about me? If no one's in the office, how's anyone ever going to notice me? How am I ever going to climb the ladder? I mean, what would you say to that?
So in order to, that's a very, very, I think quite a difficult question for me to try and answer here off the cuff. But what I would say is that there's been an author that I've always appreciated reading their work by, and it's Cal Newport. And I first came to Cal Newport through a book that I got when my kid went to school. My son went to school for the first time, and I wanted to be well prepared, and I got How to Be a Straight A Student. Now, How to Be a Straight A Student is for children who are much further down the line in terms of their education career than primary school, but it gave me a lot of insights to help get my son ready for school and help get my son to a level of attainment at school, and my daughter when she entered school. But that's not the book I'm talking about. Cal Newport is the author, and the book I'm talking about is So Good They Can't Ignore You. Dip into that book. He's a great writer. Dip into that book. If reading's not your thing, he's got a talk at Google. You could just type it in, so good they can't ignore you, Cal Newport, Google, something like that. And you'll find the talk. It's 45-minute long thing where, I think good work will never go unnoticed. And if you're so good that it can't ignore you, then you're going to get the opportunities presented to you, in my opinion. But I'm a bit of a dinosaur. I've been working now for a good 20 or so years in practice. So someone with a younger point of view, what do you think? If I reflect the question back to you, Tom, what do you think? Where would you take it if I asked you that question?
I think it's highly dependent on the field as well. So I suppose if you're working in a job where it's something like, I don't know, more hands-on working from home. So something like coding, something along those lines, maybe you're more likely to get noticed because those sort of fields have already embraced the working from home anyway. So I would imagine they've probably got more of a model for, how people interact remotely and how success is measured remotely versus, I guess, other disciplines where maybe they haven't figured out a model for it yet. So they're probably a bit behind in terms of, and old fashioned in terms of how they monitor their staff or keep on top of who's doing what and who's doing it best. So I think it is probably dependent on the field. But I also, I do agree with what you say to a point as well, in that, if you're really good at your job, whether you work remote or not, I would like to think that someone would notice. I'm trying not to be pessimistic again, but you just never know. But I would like to think that you would get noticed. But I think the hybrid model for me is that, again, I'm going to say that it's the best balance of both, because I do still think, especially in this day and age as well, and I always go on about social media and, how we're more connected than ever, but we're further apart than we've ever been. I think that it's good to get some face-to-face time, not over a webcam. So I think when it comes to meetings as well, so the way that I've adopted it all during lockdown, because I have been still going into the office, because obviously my job is filmmaking and multimedia, so I do have to go into the office for that part. I tend to get all my meetings out of the way when I'm in the office, face-to-face stuff, and then I'll go home and I'll do my filming and I'll do all of that kind of other side at home when I just want to be in my space. And to me, that seems like a good model. It works because when you need to do the stuff that is just for you, you can just get on with it. When you need to be in the social, more interactive parts of the job, which I think most jobs have them, I think being in the office and having that face-to-face interaction benefits. It probably will get you noticed more than sitting on a Zoom call. So I would encourage employers to not look at it as black and white and try and combine the two approaches together. I don't think anyone wants to go back 5 days a week into the office. I think if you asked or polled most people, you probably get a pretty strong no, to be honest.
You might be surprised. There will be a few outliers. There will be a few outliers, but I wonder how much of that is kind of people at the top of the tree very worried about what the likelihood of change is going to do to their organization or their business or their department or their,
Yeah, I suppose it'll be the the CEOs and the business owners that want people back, because but they're the ones.
Trust is intangible and it's difficult to be measured. Whereas, 9 to 5, everyone's there and everyone's, I know that they're all there, but how much of that is door shut, foot on desk, wait until 5 o'clock comes because you finished everything at 4:30? Do you know what I mean?
And then you just check that everyone else is still working and then you leave.
Yeah.
And get into your Range Rover. But I think
that's the goal, Tom. That's the goal.
Oh, it was one time. Then I grew up and realized it's not the goal. But I mean, isn't it nice to just be able to like have dinner with your family stuff?
It's absolutely lovely. And that was one of the first benefits that I began to feel. First of all, more sleep because I don't have to get up and commute. Second of all, no commute. Third of all, 5 o'clock or whatever finish time I happen to have that day rolls around and boom, dinner time with the kids or playtime, whatever it is. There's a lot more quality time that takes place than there used to be. I mean, I was quite used to sort of rolling in and being exhausted at the end of the day and just being like, hi. But now
it is exhausting.
Yeah, the commute. I mean, I live in London and on the outskirts of London, and I work on the other side of London to where I live, and that's a choice. And it has been a choice for about 20 years for me now because that just happens to be where the work is. Yeah, but it's not particularly nice. But I found ways of dealing with it. And I found since I've been going back in, like those ways are coming back to me. Reading, podcasts, meditation. All of these things can be done on my commute to cope with the
commute.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really have much more to say on this. I don't know if you do, but I would probably ask you one more thing before we go, because I think we've covered most of it. And it's something that I've seen come up a lot, which is salaries. And obviously it links to working from home. And I would wonder what advice you would give to employers on that, because some employers have essentially said that if someone chooses to work from home, I think it was 4 days a week or more for some of them, they're going to slice salaries. To basically offset how much it would cost to commute in. Some employers in London are going to get rid of the London weighing if you decide to take a job in London but live outside of London. And again, if you work the majority of your job from home, they'll do that. I wonder what advice you would give on this.
Well, it feels a bit punitive, don't you think? I'm going to cut your salary unless you come into the office. There's a few different elements of this equation, but I think, again, the answer will be similarly that people who are disgruntled enough will just leave that job and you risk losing really good people. So, I mean, where and how do they arbitrate who gets London weighing or who gets the cut off? You say 4 days, either you're back 4 days or you get your pay cut, or you're working from home, but you're not working in London and your home is not in London. It all gets very complicated. And I just don't think it would really stand up to any sort of scrutiny personally. However, having said that, if my employer said you can stay at home 4 days a week, 5 days a week, and take a cut in pay, I would have to very deeply consider that versus being back in 5 days a week.
I suppose if it bounces out, you're not really any worse off when you take the commute off. Yeah, a lot of people probably still would consider it, but as you said, it is punitive. And it almost feels like they're holding people to ransom to come back, which is how I see it. Obviously, you've got to try and you've got to look at it balanced, and you've got to try and understand that they're trying to be fair to the people who are choosing to work there 5 days a week in the office. That is kind of a choice on their part. If the employer is giving the choice, then the choice that they want to work there is their choice. So like you say, very complicated, very difficult. I wouldn't want to be the one making these decisions right now. And I think that's the good place to leave it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you for a great podcast this week, Tom. That was a good one. Yes, complicated last bit, but interesting nonetheless. So if you've got a point of view on this, folks, write in and let us know. Contribute. Do let us know because we like it. Please like, subscribe, and share. I was just about to say that myself. Like, if you're struggling with that battle and you're with your employer, just let us know how it's going and let us know what your thoughts are. We'd be very interested to hear, I think. So yeah, on that note, that's it for this episode of the Mind Games podcast. I would once again like to thank the Master of Positivity, Chris Allen, for being my amazing co-presenter as always. I have been Tom, the Chronic Health Warrior. And if you want to,
You can always like and subscribe on any of our social channels. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And if you would like to send us a question, please send us questions. We like questions.
Please.
Yeah. We're still where we get so many questions, but we want more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So please send them to our inbox, askmindgamesuk@gmail.com. That is askmindgamesuk@gmail.com. You can also send questions to us on our social channels. So that includes Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Don't slide into our DMs. Just send us a message. Sounds better. So on that note, we're going to let you go, and we will catch you next week, every Monday, bi-weekly, for the next episode of the Mind Games podcast. See you later, everyone.